My guest today is returning to the Old Grey Mares podcast. After working as a CTV reporter for 10 years, she ran and was elected the councillor for the Uptown Ward, Ward 7 in Waterloo, and she represented the ward for 2 terms from 2010 to 2018. She stepped down after her second term, and she now heads up her own powerhouse global public relations agency. In her first podcast, we had a great discussion about her foray into politics and a detailed look at what it took to campaign in a municipal election. For anyone wanting to better understand what is involved in a municipal campaign, I highly recommend you have a listen. It's a textbook on what it takes to run and win. Since we spent that whole time talking about the campaign, we needed to bring her back to talk about some of the things she worked on as a councillor. So I'm pleased to welcome back to the Old Grey Mares podcast, Melissa Durrell.
Thanks, Rob.
Melissa, Big Jim's daughter. Big Jim's daughter. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Good to be back.
So listen, I wanted to ask you, when you first got elected in 2010, okay, look, I'm a dad with 3 daughters. If someone did something, I'm going to be in there with my words of advice and wisdom, whether they were asked for or not. But you tell me, what were Jim Durrell's pieces of advice to you when you first got elected?
Yeah, great. He gave me some great advice. The first thing I know, Rob, you and I've talked about this. He talked about how, getting the night you get elected is one of the best days ever. And then the real work starts. And I think you've got a statement you've often shared.
No, I say it's like, it's good news, bad news. Good news, you got elected. Bad news, you got elected.
Yes, that's right. So, and it was wonderful too. I mean, my website actually went down. It got so many hits. And so, it was just like,
nice.
It was great. But that said, his advice to me was keep quiet, and it was hard for me to do, but keep quiet for the first 6 months to lay the land. He also said, learn the budget. That's where everything is. And I had been covering the budget because as a CTV reporter, so I was familiar with it, but there's nothing like, there's one thing to be covering it and there's another thing to be voting on it. And so the budget is a beast. I tell that to everybody who wants to get elected, learn the budget. It's a beast, but you need to know it. Yep. And then finally he said, learn, like this city, one of the major jobs is the pipes, right? The wastewater, the water.
Yep.
Exactly. And so my first commission was public works. And it was an awesome commissioner at the time, Bill Garibaldi. I'll give him a shout out on your podcast. He's a great guy. And he had to teach me all about how the city worked. And, much of the budget goes to our water pipes, our sewage pipes, to our roads, some considerable amount of every city budget. And so for me, that was a really good learning curve. I know we're talking about green spaces today. But it is.
We want to talk about this intro part. So I think that first bit about listening is such great advice. I mean, that's almost like worldly advice for anything you do, right? Is sort of sit back, take it in, listen, and learn before you jump in with both feet, because sometimes those 2 feet can land in your mouth.
Well, ask me, Rob, did I listen to him? Because no, I didn't.
Melissa.
I know. I got super excited.
My daughters don't listen to me either. So, and I didn't listen to my dad. So, I mean, that's how it goes, right?
About 3 months in though, I started to really listen to him again. And I kind of refocused at about 3 months in.
Well, let me ask you, did something happen in those first 3 months that kind of snapped you around?
I lost everything. Every time we go in for something, I was losing those votes. And so I realized I hadn't done the work I needed to do with that council to be able to get the things through that I needed to get through for Uptown. So it was at that point I started to build some relationships with the other city councilors. I was working really hard to get to know the staff because they're your right hand, literally your right hand. Yeah. And so it was that, I think, it's like snowboarding. I just took off and went down the blue square first, and then I went back to the green, and then I went blue. And I think I kind of got to black
after you broke a leg, but anyway.
It slowed me down whether I needed to or not.
Proverbial broke a leg. But that's good advice, and we'll talk about that because it kind of touches on our park situation later on in terms of compromising and negotiating and working within council. Because as I always say in these various podcasts, it comes up, and I know you agree, is that the nice thing about being around the horseshoe with everybody is you don't come there with a political background per se, or a policy platform that is ingrained in some party politics, but you're coming as your own person, negotiating with everybody to find some compromise and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rob. Like, I truly came as someone who lived in the neighborhood and wanted to make Uptown better. And every single council that was around the horseshoe and the mayor, they were doing the same thing for their respective wards. And so we all have competing interests because we all want to make our wards the best wards they can be. And there's only a small pot of money for that to happen. So it really is about relationship building and looking for balance.
It just made me think too, because also too, I mean, if you're running for re-election, there's also this concept, what have you done for your ward when you go back to the people after 4 years, after promising certain things when you run? So there's always that sort of in the background as well. I mean, that's just the realities of the situation. The best time is when you're not running again. And then you can...
Yes. Nobody's looking at your past record.
Right, exactly. Because there's no business like political business. It's like in the public eye. Like you run your agency, I run my law practice. We have our own financials. We can do whatever we want. We make our own decisions. There's no reporter calling us up and saying, well, why did your year end look like this or that or the other thing, right? So that's the public eye is a big one. So when you ran, remind us again what the key platforms were, because I want to see in terms of what you worked on versus what you ran on, right? Sort of as a bit of a comparison.
Well, that's a good point, Rob, because I'm talking to a lot of people right now that are running in the election coming up in October. And my key things were financial clarity. We had the RIM Park scandal hanging over us still, not scandal per se, but we were still dealing with the legal implications of RIM. So that was a big thing for me. And it was mostly because I've been covering it from reporter. So that, that's something interesting, because I think we actually talked about this in the last podcast. That doesn't necessarily resonate with, the people who are walking down the streets in Uptown, working, they're like financial security, like, Waterloo looks like it's in a good place. So I'm not sure if that one necessarily landed, if you will. But secondly, it was traffic. Oh my gosh. Every door I knocked in Uptown, as we're putting up towers, we're concerned about the increased traffic. And of course, intensification, these tall buildings, those kinds of things. That was a massive thing. And that's kind of what led to the green space. And one of the things I did door knock on was around, Mary Ellen Park. They had their key message was clear. We wanted to double size our park. So I did hear that loudly. I heard T2, Waterloo Park as well. It was really kind of in this, it hadn't changed in 20 years. I mean, other than we may have had a different pig, a different alpaca, they were still there, so we definitely needed the Waterloo Park needed
you had to put some lipstick on that alpaca.
That's right. That's right. So I think there was definitely, looking at how can we make the city better? The public square had just come online too. So, we were talking about drawing people into the core in a way that we hadn't, because now we space to do it. So that was really interesting. And of course, LRT was looming as well. So, a lot of the things that we were talking about where, we need to create a city that is livable, walkable, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, and I just taped a podcast about a situation that I dealt with where sometimes events occur that you don't even think about while you're campaigning that suddenly take over what you have to put your focus on. But parks was one of the things, green spaces was one of the things that you were talking about, and that certainly became a significant issue for you because look at, I went to St. Louis school from kindergarten to grade 6, and so that playground was my domain for a long time. Learned to skate there. Baseball. Got chased by the bigger kids. Became one of the bigger kids. I mean, that was really life forming for me, and going there. So, but it had really gotten run down over the years. That space, right? I mean, that quote, I'll use park in quotation marks because it really didn't feel like a park after a while.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the Catholic school that owned St. Louis School, so this Catholic school board owned St. Louis School, and because the St. Louis School was also there was about, I think it was 0.3 acres, something like that, on the other side of Willow Street, which was their parking. Because as we know, and I mean, over, 10 years of, more than that, of being around the city, when you build a building, you have to make sure there's parking, people that live in it. And so no one knew the Catholic school didn't really have plans for what they were going to do with this dilapidated school. There was asbestos issues. I heard the ceiling was falling down. It was not in great shape. And so they knew that this wasn't an asset that they were going to use. But prior to that, the city had only wanted to buy the parking lot, which was what directly connected to the park.
Right.
And, smartly, the school board was like, no, because if we sell you that, we'll never be able to get rid of, we won't be able to develop.
Because you needed some parking for whatever development was going to be there. And they had that base just across the road on Willow. Yeah.
That's right.
And I can see that. So there's two competing interests here. So and if you're only looking within your box and not thinking outside the box, you don't find a solution. But but you found a solution.
We did. And it's funny, you talk about how, you're nostalgic for that school. There's a lot of people in this area that went to that school and they were nostalgic for it. And so, some of the counselors like, look, let's just sell the property. They can raise the building and put something else new in there. Right. So that was one of the options that was out there if and when we bought both. And so one of the things that we looked at was, well, no, there is some heritage around this building. So how can we protect that so that it can still be a part of our community? I think the other worry too, Rob, is, as you know, it's 2 blocks in from the proper, what we would consider uptown intensification space. Right. And so, if you put in a 20-story building there, it would not look, because it's in the middle of all.
No, it wouldn't fit the neighborhood. No.
Right. And so, we just thought, like, how do we set this project up for success as well? Because, most developers would look at it and say, let's get rid of it and let's go up 10 stories or 12 stories.
Yeah, but hold on one sec. Before we get to that point, though, the city doesn't own it yet. We're still at the point where the school board owns it.
Rewind. Okay. Yes. So I think the best to sum that up is the staff, our legal team, negotiated with the school board to say, yes, we'll buy both. And the idea behind that we really had to sell to the rest of the council was that we need to manage this project or it'll never get done. And this had been sitting on a back burner for decades. So we needed to do something to make this happen. So it was about 2012, I believe, that we actually got negotiations done. It took a long time, few in-camera sessions, and finally we got the purchase done. In that time, also, we learned that the former furniture maker that was there, as many did, just dumped everything onto the ground. So we knew that there was going to be a ton of remediation. Right. And so the neighbor was like, oh, maybe we could put a community garden in here.
Hold on, we're not at that point yet.
We're not there yet. Okay.
Because you had to do some negotiating though with the other members of council to buy it though, didn't you? I mean, were they all like, yeah, okay, let's buy it. Great idea.
No. Never.
No. So I think this is important. This is an important lesson for our listeners here, is talking about, because isn't there this general view that the councillors representing suburbia are looking at the downtown and saying, not saying this, but like, more money into the money pit?
Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying.
Okay. I didn't want to be harsh.
Yeah. No, you're right. I heard it all.
So how do you get them to say, yeah, let's spend, like, it was about $530,000 or $40,000 to buy this building and half a parking lot. And they're going like, why are we putting more money into this? We don't have stuff in our areas that we could be investing in.
Yeah. So we had $500,000. I think for me, it was really about, this is something I brought to them. I pleaded the case, which I think is important, that this is a dilapidated building. It's been sitting here for decades. There was, at that time, think back 10 years, Uptown was really changing. It was, we had a lot of student housing here. That was all being turned into families or new homeowners. So the Uptown was really changing. And we were also putting a lot of buildings up. So whether we were voting every Monday on a new development, we definitely were hearing about developments that were coming forward on a very regular basis.
Actually, let me ask you this, because I know the Mary Allen area had a lot of student housing,
right?
But as Regina got built up with those towers over there at Regina University, did that result in fewer student houses in the Mary Allen area? So that's what you're talking about. They were becoming more family homes.
Yes. In fact, I would go as far to say as there is hardly any student homes in Mary
Right.
Ellen or Uptown
Right.
West any longer. Maybe a
Okay.
little bit along the like Herb corridor, you might see a
Yeah.
few student houses there, but as soon as you get in, there was a ton of student homes. Like I'll never forget, one of my neighbors was saying, they looked up to their neighbor's house and there was a guy peeing off the second floor balcony,
Yeah.
like that was a regular occurrence in Uptown 10,
I think
12
I think that was
years.
a University of Waterloo student. I went to Laurier.
Yeah.
We would never do that sort of thing.
Sure.
But yeah, but when I was at
was
Laurier in the
ghetto.
late 80s, there was all kinds of student housing in that area. So now the area is
it's
changing,
flipping.
and so now you've
Big
got
time.
this school, and the school board doesn't know what to do with it. And like, did you get unanimous support from council to purchase?
Oh, I don't think so. I know I had the mayor. The mayor was definitely behind me on that. I was trying to look into some of the voting records and I couldn't come up with all of them.
That's okay.
What I can tell you is that yes, I didn't quite get the answer on that. I've been emailing with some of the staff to say, like, can you remember when?
Yeah, no problem.
But how we finally got it through, and I say we because it was definitely I was getting help from the staff to put this together. But a big part of it was that we were intensifying in Uptown, and I could go to the suburban councillors and say, look, you voted for this 10-story tower. You voted for this 22-story tower. We need more green space in Uptown. Like all those people who live in those towers are using our parks. Mary Ellen Park was this tiny little piece of grass, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't, I shouldn't say tiny. It was not, but if we could expand it, and within a dog walking distance, we have 6 towers that are going to utilize it. So that was the argument that I made, Rob. And it was very much if you're going to vote for a building, you got to vote for parks too.
So
and I put those two together.
Right. So the plan is like, we'll buy the building and the parking lot across the road, and we'll convert that parking lot into a larger park or incorporate it into a larger park. And then you'll figure out what to do with that building separately. But the city can do that. The school board's not involved. You control the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the important part for that too, for at least in my thinking, was I could convince the rest of the council to be on board because we were intensifying so quickly in Uptown that we needed more green space. This was a green space that we could move on quickly. Yeah. Then as far as the buying of both, we knew that what we've been doing with just asking every couple of years, asking to buy the parking lot wasn't working. So we needed to do something else. So that strategy came into play. We'll buy both. We'll sell St. Louis. At the very beginning, we weren't sure exactly, like it was kind of up in the air. And I think, people thought the whole thing was going to be the new Mary Ellen Park. But
we'll get to that in a sec. We'll get to that in a sec about the community meetings. but we did buy both. You're also suggesting, though, that this was to convince some of the councillors too, that this was kind of like a template. Your actions here were something that they might be able to apply to their areas as well.
So we pulled that card out later in the process, because I thought $500,000 for this property, that $500,000 can pay for everything in Mary Ellen Park. And we're like, good as gold, right? Like that's how simple I was thinking. We get,
that's your elevator pitch. You got to have an elevator pitch. Right.
We sell St. Louis, we get $800,000. Then we've got $800,000 to spend on Mary Ellen Park. No taxpayers really, because the one pays for the other. We're good. It's everything clears in the margins. That didn't happen.
Best laid plans.
It became far more expensive. We had to come up with an idea of where can we find more money. And so of course we had to go to the DC's development. Right. Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
And that was when the template came out.
So when you bought the property, there was an environmental issue, right? Around the building?
Yeah.
On the playground too, or just the building?
No, the playground had been cleaned already for the most part. It was the parking lot that we were taking over. It needed extensive remediation. It was one of those, like, if we go a meter, it can cost this much. If we go 2 meters, because maybe somebody wants to do food, we'd have to go even further to get rid of all the bad stuff that could actually be toxic. I think we ended up sort of meeting in the middle. There was a compromise there, but remediation, I learned more about it than I ever need to know in my lifetime, but there's times that you can do it. And, our timing had to be right, because it's better to do remediation in the spring, or I think, spring. And so we just like time. So we ended up getting this through, and I think it was like summer, August. We had to wait for the following year for the remediation to happen.
Right.
Just time. It was just watching
So
the calendar roll.
I'm gonna give everybody just a quick heads up. So you're saying you bought it around 2012, and there was no ribbon cutting until 2018.
Yeah. That's
okay,
right,
but anyway,
Rob.
we'll get to that. But I just so everyone understands what kind of time frame we're talking about. So anyway, so now the city
this could
takes
be a
on
Parks and Rec. I think
yeah,
honestly,
right.
There was one about a parquet, and I thought,
the parquet. You're right. That was an ongoing theme. I love that show. It's a great show. So so the city undertook the remediation work, or was it sold and someone else undertook the remediation work?
So once we sold St. Louis, so let's get that off of the plate. So we ended up selling the school to a local developer who was essentially going to just clean out the insides and make it into condos. So that,
and you only had one offer, right? Like there was, like you put it out for bids, and only one bid came in from a local, a developer who lived in the area.
Correct. Yeah. I was a little disappointed not to see more. Because there was only one offer, it was a low ball. But
I think today you would see more offers on stuff. It just seemed like there was a bit of a lull for a period of time there.
Yeah, you're right. There really was. And I think, it was a bit of a shame. And it took a while, but at the same time, like, I think I can look back 10 years now and say, the building looks gorgeous. Yeah. It got saved. So it's still part of our neighborhood, and we doubled it. So, let me ask you, we have gotten more money? Probably. I mean, I would have liked,
don't worry about that. Yeah. I mean, every developer knows they leave money on the table all the time. You can't look back that way, and nobody times the markets or anything perfectly. So don't worry about that. Yeah. But at one point, though, the community had some thoughts about that building, right? As
thoughts.
So you had a session with the community before you sold the building, I guess, then, to say, hey, community, what do you envision for this? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'd say there's like kind of 3 phases. The first phase, after we bought both the building and the parking lot, is we wanted to do a design charrette to see what we needed. And I think a part of it came from, we were hearing things like, we want a pool, like a public pool.
Everybody wants a pool.
Park.
Everybody wants a pool.
I talked about the community garden, which would impact the remediation process. And so, one of the things we basically opened it up and let just every crazy idea. And I think we encouraged it too. I mean, 2012 was a time of like, we were like, any idea you have is a great idea, bring it out here. And
green lighting, you were green lighting.
We greenlit to the point, like, people came in and at one point they took the roof off of the St. Louis school and made it like it was sort of like an acropolis. You could
my gosh.
Parkour. There was, a Mary Allen public community center. So there'd be a community center space. There were a lot of great ideas, but actually ideas that we couldn't do. And I think, ultimately, as you look back, I think that process for us was, we should have been really clear, because in my head, it was always that St. Louis School would be sold and that would pay for the rest. So when St. Louis School all of a sudden became a part of a triple expanded Mary Ellen Park, I think not only the staff, how are we going to pay for this? Like, we just didn't have the money for it. And the process, it just
so expectations, community expectations weren't managed, got way out of control.
Yeah. It was a good learning experience for me. But sure.
Did a report came out of that charrette, I guess. What did you do with that report when it came out of that charrette, that meeting, to look at all these?
Well, you want to talk about, I think the counselors basically all stared at me like, you messed this up, Durrell. Like, you screwed this up. So we took a break. We had to pull it back. We knew that, and then it started to move forward, where we were like, okay, let's put the St. Louis School up for RFP, see what we can get back for it, see if we can get some money in, and let's focus on just the park.
What was the community blowback when you kind of poo-pooed on there?
Well, I had a really good relationship with the Mary Allen Neighborhood Association, and I can't speak highly enough about the Mary Allen Neighborhood Association. They were pivotal. The whole time I was a counselor, I could go to them and talk to them about ideas. And the person who was running it at the time, the lead on it, was a guy named Brooke, awesome guy, Brooke Thiessen. And he basically acknowledged, he's like, yeah, that got out of control. I think common sense eventually took over. Like, you got the big dreams, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, wait a minute, common sense. So I think that the Marion Neighborhood Association, we talked about it. We talked to the people about it. It didn't blow up as badly as it may have. There may have been a letter or two to the editor during that time, Rob, maybe a few emails in my email box. But, at the same time, at least and I think I kept coming back to the point, like, at least we're moving forward on this. This has sat dormant for 20 odd years. At least we're getting some progress.
The city controls the whole thing, which is better than two people controlling it, right? It's like anything. If you have a partnership, it's like in my law practice, I had a partnership at one time, then I became a sole practitioner. And I can tell you, decision-making was a lot easier when I was a sole practitioner.
Yeah. And I think, like, for the Mary Ellen people too, I think it was one of the things that constantly came back up again. They were passionate about it. So I think for them, it was, let's just keep moving this forward. There was more momentum to move the park forward than it was to maybe tar and feather the counselor and the staff for going off in a direction that wasn't feasible.
So they understood.
We brought it back.
Yeah, they understood the selling of the building was the route that had to be go. Let me ask you, what about the heritage community and the building? What was the situation there?
We did have to put the building. It became there's all these different heritage designations, but essentially, and I believe I might get this term wrong, but it's like a non-designated heritage building, or basically it means, like, if you're going to make changes to it, you can, but we are staying there. You
got to notify the municipality about it first. So it never got designated itself as a heritage building. Okay.
We knew that would kill the RFP, but the building, we did really like this idea of keeping the girls, the boys, the different entrances. It's part of the history. So there was parts of it that we were like, we knew that it needed to be kept. I didn't want to see it get raised and have
I just want to say, by the mid 60s, the boys and girls went in any door they wanted to. So it wasn't restricted then.
Non-binary, right? They were still ahead of the time.
Whatever door, we were fine.
Yeah.
But so, you then had to go back to the community. I guess you did another design concept meeting.
We went back again with smiles and optimism in our hearts. We did. So, but at this point, the last one was sort of run by the city. And actually, that's a good mention, because I think, there's sort of that old adage of, like, don't hire consultants. Consultants just take money from the city, blah, 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 blah. They don't do the work. And there was a lot of that going on. I think, I remember hearing about that kind of stuff. And so the first consultation we did at the city, we had one of our city workers run it, and it did, nothing against our staff, but I think at the end of the day, we hired a consultant, a design consultant, and they managed it well. They knew the parameters around it. The neighborhood knew the parameters around it. And the second time it went almost textbook. However, the price went up. That was the big thing. So the
price went up.
Doubled, more than doubled. Yeah.
The cost to do what you wanted to do in the park.
Yeah.
So from what to what approximately?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say exactly. I think we had budgeted, we were hoping to keep everything around the $500,000, up and around there. It ended up being about 1.3 million.
Wow. So let me just 1 second on the sale of the building, though, to the local developer. I think the sale was around just over $500,000. It was about 535 or something, with the city kicking back some money to help with the remediation costs.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
We had bought the building for just over $500,000. We sold it for just over $500,000, which didn't leave us a lot in the pot. And as you said, we also were putting some money towards.
Well, you could have had a bigger bill for the cleanup anyway, right? So at least you capped your costs with respect to that. Look, you're a municipality. You're not there to make money. You're there to invest money in the community, and it's not about profit and loss. It's about investment in the future, and you can't really put a value. What value to put on a park, right? I
On a
mean,
green space, yeah,
yeah,
that's used
exactly.
every day by hundreds and hundreds of
Yeah,
people. So
absolutely,
I agree
absolutely.
with you. I just think there's still, maybe it's that I've been in the private world for 4 years now. I start to get that, like, oh, you got to be so careful with
You're
tax
going
dollars. And
back
I
to your
think,
old ways.
yeah,
You're losing touch. You're losing
you got to be
touch.
so careful with tax dollars. And so I think, there is always this thing, especially when you're talking about $500,000, right? Like, and you say it like it's nothing, but it was, these were really stressful times. And there's, when somebody says to me, oh, this is actually going to cost $1.3 million. And, all of us at the city are like, where are we going to find this money? I mean, we're really fortunate because we are in the uptown. And so that's one thing I can say is, as we've got DCs, right? Development charges on all
Right.
the buildings that were going up. So there was a pot of money that we could look at, and we ended up, that's what we
Yeah, and
went
just
to.
to
That saved
explain
our butt.
to people listening, development charges are charges against new construction in a certain
Correct.
area, and they're usually 4 or 5 items that are designated that the money can be used for example, fire services or road enhancements or
Yeah.
parks, for example.
And parks. Yes.
And so any development in the area is supposed to fund anything new. So this would fall under the new development that the money could be used for, because it's accommodating more people in the community,
Correct.
right? So you got the
Yes.
existing infrastructure. Now you've got to enhance that infrastructure for the new people. So it's using that money for that. You can't use it to replace old stuff, but you use it to invest in new.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
but
Good. Good.
1.3 million, that's a big hit. So all
Yes.
your counselors were happy to support that, I guess.
Sorry. Uh, no, surprisingly, they were not. That new price tag was that was probably one of the biggest learning curves for me as a city councilor, because I had to basically go to every city councilor and the mayor and talk about the importance of it. Now, we did have a positive staff report. So the staff that were working on this had recommended that we move forward with it. They found the funding places. So, it wasn't coming from the tax base. It was coming from, we had some green park space that we could use. We had the DCs that we could use. So there were places, but this comes back to the old urban versus suburban,
Right.
especially in a
Right.
city like Waterloo, where almost every city councilor is representing a suburb, because that's the way our city is set up.
Yeah.
And so
you're the core. You're the urban with the Uptown Waterloo ward, and everybody like Eastbridge or wherever else, Beechwood, whatever. I mean, they all have a different character to those wards versus what you have in the Uptown. And it always seems like money is invested in the Uptown or downtown in other cities all the time.
Yes. And
you felt that tug
heard
and
that
pull
over and over and over again, like literally. And I went back and looked at a couple of news articles. The counselors came right out and said that, it was about balance, and they didn't feel like their wards were getting the same balance as Uptown. For me, we had a really great staff at Waterloo that I was leaning on incredibly. And one of the things we came up with was, look, this isn't going to be the only urban park or inner city park, because, whether you're in Ward 2 or Ward 1 or Ward 4, we're always going to be looking at green spaces. And so what we came up with was this idea that we templated everything that we did. So the idea was, okay, so we will for intensified areas. So if we're going to be doing a park in an intensified area, this is what we want to do. So from the acquisition of the properties to the community engagement, we templated all that. So now the city of Waterloo doesn't have to go back every time, make the same, if you want to call them mistakes that we made with Mary Allen. We've now templated that process.
Right.
So we can do it over and over again, which we actually did with another park in Uptown, Alexandra Park.
Yeah, but that's Uptown. Now you didn't give me an example of a suburban example. It's like, you're not more investment in the Uptown.
Yes. Let me do the math here. 1, 2, 3. So Ward 3 had a new park get put in, and they did use this process as well. So it did get used.
So this is one of the ways you quote sold it to the other counselors, was that this becomes a model, and you can dust off this model, and it can apply to any other place you have where you want to sort of intensify, squeeze in a park in an area.
Correct. But Rob, I did not go into that vote without knowing I had 5 votes because I was not confident of what was going to happen
Yeah.
when we went through. So
How many, the mayor and what, is there 9 people around the horseshoe?
7. There's, oh, sorry, there's 8 of us, including the mayor. There's 7 wards in the mayor. So we're
Okay,
an
so
even
there's
number
8.
in Waterloo.
Yeah.
So
So you need
typically the mayor
5.
doesn't vote.
Because
Yeah.
4, yeah, typically doesn't vote, but could vote. So then it'd be 4-4.
The mayor voted on this one. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe I had maybe 2 counselors that's no, possibly 3.
Yeah.
And I got a bit of a dressing down on this one. I'm not going to lie.
Dressing down after or before? Or?
Like for this whole process, like,
Yeah.
it was a long process. It was very complicated, 2 public sessions on this. Like this was for what it was. I took a few shots, but learned a lot, and I hopefully left the city in a better place coming out of it.
Okay.
That's the
well, we're not done the podcast. Sounds like we're done the podcast or something. So this vote came in, I think it was around 2015 or something like that. In my material, it said something about, but you had opposition from councillors concerned about the rising costs on this project.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, this discussion about this, urban versus suburban viewpoint, because I think it happens in all communities, because there's always this kind of view. Isn't there a view generally that, sure, you represent the uptown ward, but you're uptown, you're downtown, that's sort of like your jewel of your community, isn't it? That people come to see. I mean, if visitors are coming, they're coming to your uptown. You want to have a presentable uptown. You want people to have a great experience. And when they talk about their experiences, I mean, where are all your festivals mostly? Your jazz festival, outdoor performers, the buskers, right? Where's all that happening, right? That's all happening in your uptown core. So that's why it's so important to make that.
Our business community is in the uptown.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're right. And I think most, I'm not going to say most, all counselors understand the importance of an urban core. And, we had a really good example, the city of Kitchener, that put all their money into their economic development funds. They did that. I think it was a levy. And they had a couple $1 million that they put away to fund.
Yeah, it was a big fund.
That was really inspiring. And I think, that actually gives other urban counselors a great, not only like a best practices, cities that invest in their cores will see advantages. So, I think that's part of it. You just become a bit of a broken record though, Rob, because I felt like I was constantly, a lot of the things that we were doing in uptown cost money. The property is more expensive in uptown. Buying a house and raising it to build a park costs more money than it would cost if you were in the suburbs. And frankly, most of the suburbs are designed with trees, sidewalks, parks, schools, they're intentionally designed, whereas uptown was designed 150 years ago. So we're still kind of working with, and I think it works, but there's still, we need to be making changes as we go around.
Well, that makes, when you're talking about constantly and doing that, it's almost like it gets tiring after a while. The negotiating and what you have to do. And it just reminded me, I had a flashback to my podcast with Yvonne Fernandez, who stopped after a while because she just got worn out by the process in terms of trying to negotiate with the fellow counselors, trying to get some things happening. And she always felt like she was on the losing end of anything she was trying to do. So that just wore her, like you could tell, it just wore her right out. I called that podcast a cautionary tale, because it's not all, hey, it gets back to my good news, you got elected, bad news, you got elected, because now you have to manage, you have to conduct a local government, and you're competing with a lot of interests, not only your own constituency, but if you're a ward councillor, other constituencies. If you're a mayor, it's the whole thing. It's like Ken Sealing always says, I use this line all the time, every third podcast, I think, but your circle of friends gets smaller when you're the mayor, because you're going to make decisions that are going to upset some people, and sometimes you just can't get over that. But you never think about that urban suburban back and forth that goes on. So on
a regular basis, people said to me, "You're too uptown." That's what they would say. You're too focused on uptown.
Yeah.
And I would say, I appreciate the constructive criticism, but at the same time, this is my ward, and that's predominantly what I'm here to do, is represent uptowners and get as much. And it's not hard. LRT, streetscape, development. I think at one point we had 6,000 new we had several new things equaling close to 6,000 new people. It's one of the most populous wards because we were putting up all these towers. So people were moving in. I often talk to the clerk about, there's a point where we need to split Uptown into 2 wards so that the Uptown councillor has some help. Because there's so every time, if there's 3 buildings going in Uptown, I'm dealing with 3 major proposals that have the older residents because they don't want change to happen. They're upset about it. I've got, people talking about how we need to add more housing. So there's those kinds of pressures. Then you get, is it pretty? Is it not pretty? The design that everybody has an opinion on that. How much traffic is going to get added? And you times that by 3. There was a point where I was said to the clerk, I'm like, we need to split Uptown. It's got to have at least 2 councilors in it because it's just becoming overwhelming.
First of all, your baby is beautiful. So that's the first thing, right? But we did the same thing. And AIR was growing so rapidly in North Dumfries Township because it was over half of the entire population of the township. And we had 1 out of 4 councillors in AIR. So we ended up splitting that to get 2 councillors there and 2 out in the rural. So we have a bit of a urban rural. Yours is an urban suburban, exactly. Ours is an urban rural discussion all the time. You have a discussion with a farmer about property taxes, and you'll get them going. So this is 2015. So you went through an election, with a certain amount of progress on the Mary Allen Park. Did you recall at all? I didn't really ask you about this before, but during that election in 2014. Did that issue come up in terms of the pace of progress, or people were generally happy with things moving along?
Rob, no one ran against me in 2014.
Oh, right. I guess they're happy.
I don't know, happy or just, no one wanted to run in Uptown because literally our roads were being ripped up and, there's so much construction. Maybe nobody wanted the job. I don't know. But no, I was acclaimed. I did do a little bit of door knocking. I did do a little bit of at Mary Allen Park, Waterloo Park, but I didn't run a full campaign for obvious reasons. I was doing a monthly newsletter, so I was getting feedback. One of the things we tried to do is create stronger neighborhood associations because Mary Allen had a great neighborhood association and was incredibly helpful. So looking at Uptown West started its neighborhood association within the first year that I was there. And then another neighborhood, we were calling it Uptown North. I think they're still called Uptown North. And that would have been sort of that area. It reminds me of
Kitchener with its downtown, midtown. I mean, we've got...
right? Yeah, all of our little neighborhoods.
It's like beaches in Toronto. How many variations of the beaches can there be in Toronto, right?
Right. We did the same thing. And then we had McGregor. So we had a couple of neighborhoods. So we were building those up so that we could have those conversations. And so they would have things. I could go to those meetings and talk to sort of the leaders in the neighborhood about what was going on. So there was regular things like that happening. So I did feel like I was getting good feedback.
So back to Mary Allen then. So you get in 2015, you get the approval for the $1.3 million.
Yeah.
The community
never looked back.
Yes, you grabbed it and ran. But the community helped out too, right? In terms of private donations?
Yeah, 1.3 didn't even cover some of the ideas that the neighborhood had, which were like an enhanced playground facility, those kinds of things. Rob, I actually, with a group of other neighbors, planted some of the plantings. Like we did some of the perennial bulbs that are actually in Marion, with our own hands. So there was definitely some neighborhood involvement there. But the neighborhood raised, if you go to Mary Allen Park, so for all your listeners out there, you got to go check out Mary Allen Park now. And on the back of one of the fences, you'll see fish. And the neighborhood, actually, we all painted those fish and donated money for the playground. And so that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a great mural from Luke Swinton.
Yes, we had some public art in there as well. Yeah. We really want to, and if you're going to the market, I recommend you come on a Thursday night. That's our annual market in Mary Allen Park. It's awesome. There's hundreds of people that come out to it. So it's a really exceptional event. So come check it out. But yes, the neighborhood did get involved. And I think that was also something I used when I talked to the other councillors to get them to vote for it, is the neighborhood is going to fundraise. We have commitment from the neighborhood. They will fundraise.
And they did fundraise, because they put up some play structures as well, or funded some play structures.
That's what the fish paid for. The fish paid for the playground structures.
Oh, were the fish like, did you have your, like, the donors' names on them, or people just paid? Each fish represented, a donation. Okay, nice. Nice. That was your donor wall. That's very
That's
creative.
our donor wall. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was Mary Allen Neighborhood Association. Shout out to them.
When we had built the North Dumfries Community Center, we were fortunate to raise over $2 million through the community towards the construction of that facility. So
that's big bucks.
Yeah, that is big bucks. I know.
Yeah.
we didn't know. It's, it's one of those things, like we kind of had some guidance from some fundraisers who were like consultants and then got us set up, and then we went and did it. So it wasn't like any percentage going to fundraisers or anything. So we had hired a company called Campaign. They were campaign consultants. Glenn Boy was one of the principals. And so what they did basically is they came in, they interviewed people, they gave you an idea what you could raise. And then they said, this is how your structure would set up. And then they had just a monthly stipend for a few months, and then they were out of it. And then we just went and did it. And so originally we were going to raise 1.5 and it got to 2.1. So it was just like, we were just like blind luck and didn't know any better. But so when you cut the ribbon on this place in 2018, I'm going to ask you this, okay? This is the big question.
Talk to me.
When you decided to run, you had mentioned how you were frustrated because you felt there was inaction and people wouldn't make the decisions and stuff. Do you have a better appreciation for how things were after, because you bought this thing in 2012, you didn't cut a ribbon until 6 years later?
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah. I think, well, and it's actually, honestly, Rob, it was one of the reasons I didn't run again, because it is exhausting. Like it really was. It was a long job. Even these, you think just doubling a park would be a small little side project I could run on top of everything else that was going on in the city. It was exhausting. I mean, I was really proud that we finally got it done. There's actually a little plaque in the park, and there was a guy named Roy, and I remember him saying to me, "You're never going to get this done." He said that to me. "You'll never get this done, Melissa." Yes. And he came up to me in 2018, and he was very sweet, and he said, "You did it." And it wasn't me. It was so many staff, Mary Ellen people, so whatever, but I totally believe in all those people who helped so much. I should not take the credit, but back to the question you asked me.
No, but there's a plaque. There's a plaque for Roy, right, in the park.
Yes, there is.
And it says, "Finally, the park."
Yes. You'll never get it done.
But just on that one point though, it's not one individual, and everybody knows that it takes a village, like they say, and it takes everybody participating. And if you don't do it in a collaborative manner, you're not going to get it done. That's
right. And we all celebrated that day together. I think, because I was frustrated with how long things took. I think it's different when you're in it. I think I was a little embarrassed that Mary Ellen took as long as it did. I still think I have a little bit of embarrassment. Like I wish it had gone a little quicker, but at the same time, all the processes, we had to go through them. We've now got a template that we can use for other parks. So we learned a lot, and I don't know if I don't think.
First of all, I don't think you should be embarrassed, okay? Because if you look at the story of Mary Ellen Park and everything that was done, and the contamination, and trying to figure out the buildings and the different parties involved, that stuff doesn't happen fast. Like you might be able to make quick decisions in your business. If I want to go this route or change that website or do this, and you're making those decisions, boom, 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 boom. But it's in the public realm, you can't do it that way. You got to get the reports. You got to make sure all the steps are followed. You got to make sure all the rules are followed, because while we spend our own money privately, when we're elected, we're spending the public purse, and it becomes a much more serious issue. But the other thing though, I just want to touch on is the word exhausting that you used. And I can appreciate that so much. I only did one term, but it was like mayor and regional counselor and running my law practice. And I was burnt by the end of it. And, some people criticize me for not running for a second term, but there's no way I could have done it. Absolutely no way. And I had a business with, 8 staff people who were counting on their salaries and keeping that thing going. And, like most people sometimes don't appreciate being a counselor is like community service.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a calling.
It's like, yeah. And so it's like helping, let's say you join the any social
Committee.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're only doing it, some of them only allow you to stay for 8 years and then you got to go. I know I was on the Catholic Charity Board for a while. That's only an 8-year period. Some are longer, like a Lions Club or a Rotary, but there you've got a huge team of people and you sort of get involved in different things, but you're not like president for more than 8 years of the local Rotary, right? You do it for a period of time and then you step back. And a lot of people don't realize that it is exhausting. It is time consuming and it's stressful because you want to do a good job for the community. You want everything to go well. And when things don't go well, you're like, oh my gosh, how do we figure this one out? What do we do?
Yeah, you wear it, feel it. Like when, I remember the streetscape was probably one of the hardest things for me. And the Ion construction, it was mostly streetscape because we were just closed for so long uptown. And I felt it. I am a business owner in uptown. So, I was looking these people in the eyes every single day. I was seeing how long the construction took and just how frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody went up to Upton Waterloo with that fencing and the corduroy road and everything, that was like gulag or something. It was like the worst.
It was, and that I think that was probably like I honestly felt it. It hurt. I hurt because of that, and there was nothing. It's sort of like none of it was really in control. Anything that was in my control, I tried to do as best as I can. One of the things I think that I really learned was, one of my frustrations and one of the reasons I ran for council was because it felt like things weren't moving fast enough. And I do think, to your point, it's about communication. So communicating to people that this is what's happening. Yes, this feels slow, but the remediation is actually way more extensive than we thought it was going to be. So those things, as long as you can communicate with them and keep everybody understanding where you are in the process.
Yes.
I think that's really helped. What's the next step in the process? And I think the staff do that. I think we just need to amplify it more because that at the end of the day, there is a strategy, there is a plan for everything that the city's doing. Right. But it's sometimes like when people hear it for the first time, they're like, what? I had no idea, And
it's like I used to say with the community complex that we had, I tell all the volunteers, I said, look, this is a marathon, not a race. Because if you all sprint, you're going to be burnt out and I won't have you to help me to get us to the finish line. We've got to treat it like a marathon. But I would use the internet and email. I had like an email group of like 200 people that I would regularly keep updated on what was happening with the progress, because the local newspaper, the guy would say, well, how come you're not this? How come you're not that? Why? I said, no, we've got to take our time. We've got to move this along. There's steps that have to be taken. But as long as, like you say, keep everybody informed, then communication is so key. And you know what? I think you and I ran for similar reasons here. You ran because they weren't really informing the community about what was going on. So you're left with this misunderstanding about what's happening. And that's the same reason I ran. I ran because they weren't telling us what was happening. They weren't collaborative. I mean, back in the day, back in the day, this is 2010, we had a website with 3 pages of information. That's it. Yeah. I mean, that's 2010. This is not like that's not like 1990 or something.
Apparently, right?
So
that's the impression.
So communication, So I guess a good lesson then for people who are listening in is, if you want to be a counselor or you want to be involved, not only communicate with your fellow counselors, but make sure you're communicating with the community as well to keep them updated on what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll save you a lot of headaches.
Because everybody's part of your business, not like in your private business, but in the public business, every taxpayer has an opinion.
And they should.
Absolutely. Let's help them. Let's help them have a better informed opinion about it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what? We didn't get to the other parks or anything, but I think we had a great discussion and some good lessons that came out of this whole example. And, Melissa, I think you took Jim's lessons to heart, and I think Big Jim would really be proud of what his daughter did. So I congratulate you on all of that.
Oh, thanks, Rob. I'm looking forward to spending the long weekend actually in Ottawa on a dock, drinking beers with Big Jim. So,
but don't take the LRT. It was down again the other day. What a disaster.
I know. Actually, there's it's. It's a game changer. We know that for our community, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
Just got to work.
I'm doing the final podcast. It's a trilogy with Mike Murray. It's like Gordon Lightfoot's Railroad trilogy. It's the Mike Murray Ion trilogy. So we're doing the last bit on the construction. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so that's
awesome.
Coming up. Okay, listen, thanks again. Continued success.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you again soon sometime.
You got it, Rob. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Old Gray Mares podcast. If you have any ideas for stories or people you would like us to interview or reach out to, please feel free to contact us. And thank you again.